So I'm going to introduce the panelists. Now, to be fair on them, they heard my talk just now when you heard it. So they're digesting. But we have talked before together about virtue, superhabits, and so on. So let me introduce, starting closest to me, Peter Forlenza. Peter is Global Head of Equities, member of the Executive Committee at Jefferies Financial Group, which is one of the world's leading investment banks. He's based in New York, more than 35 years of leadership in financial services. He began his career in 1988 at Salomon Brothers. Remember that name because we'll be talking about that. He has had senior leadership positions at Citigroup, Bank of America, and UBS. He is also founder and CEO of Outpost Investment Group, which is a global macro hedge fund. He graduated in 1988 from the Catholic University of America, now serves on the Board of Trustees of Catholic University, and is also a long-standing member of the Board of Visitors of the Bush School of Business. And I will say our trading room is named after him, the Forlenza Finance Lab at the Bush School, in his honor. He also serves on the Board of Directors of SBP, a National Disaster Recovery and Resiliency Organization. In the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy, Mr. Forlenza co-founded Seabright Rising, an organization that raised more than $1.6 million, distributed assistance to over 300 families and businesses of affected communities on the Jersey Shore. He's also a sponsor and mentor with student sponsor partners in New York City, which is a group committed to providing quality education and mentorship to underserved communities. He and his wife Ellen have 3 adult children and live in New Jersey. Please welcome Peter. Next, we have Lynette Turicchi, who began her career at Hollywood Pictures, a division of Walt Disney Studios, as assistant to the head of casting. After various positions at Disney, she went on to head non-theatrical distribution for DreamWorks SKG, and finally the non-theatrical startup Captive Entertainment. Lynette is the owner of Falling Upwards Productions, LLC. She's the executive producer of the docuseries In the Paint, the award-winning short Mirage, directed by John V. Motla, the documentary Syndrome K, and the award-winning film Exemplum, which is directed by Paul Rowland. She's developing 2 feature films, Syndrome K with Marco Pontecorvo, and The Village Bride of Beverly Hills with Tom Struthers. Lynette is on the Catholic Talent Project Board and the Amazing Fitness Development Team and is an alumna of UCLA. Let's welcome Lynette. Rich Todd is CEO and co-founder of Innovest Portfolio Solutions, has more than 35 years of experience in investment consulting, currently provides services to institutions and families. Innovest has over 300 clients, assets of $42 billion, nearly 60 employees. And Rich has a business finance degree from Western Colorado University, has been a frequent author on fiduciary, investment, and business issues, been a columnist for the Denver Business Journal, published in the Christian Chamber of Commerce, Financial Advisor Magazine, Journal of Compensation and Benefits, and numerous other outlets, and also been a guest lecturer at conferences around the country. He's on the Board of Trustees at Western Colorado University and formerly served as president of Legatus of Colorado. He and his wife Joni have been married for more than 35 years, 2 children, Alex and Reagan, and 2 grandchildren. So please welcome Rich. So for the first question, I want to ask each of the panelists which habits of success they would point to in their own lives as having been key in their career success to date. And this is a true exercise in humility, which is speaking the truth about your successes. So there's nothing not humble about that. So just let us know which habits have been particularly helpful for you. And Peter, do you want to start?
Thank you, Andrew. And this is well timed. I happened to have been with some clients in Toronto last week, and I had a couple of clients. We were at a dinner, and they were asking why the company I'm currently at has had the measure of success we've had. And I became kind of reflective on why we've been successful, and importantly, kind of why my team has been successful. And there's a real intersection here, Andrew, and I wrote some things down. There's really, for me, not just for me personally, but for the companies I've seen successful, care. What does care mean? There's an intersection with the term you were using, Andrew, justice. And to me, and I've seen this, you want to care about your employees, you want to care about your clients, and not take what I would call kind of short-termism. Don't make the kind of easy decision, make the more long-run one. My philosophy, I've always tried to be in a position where I want my team to want to work for me, want to work with me. I want to make it so our clients want to work with us. And again, that takes a number of different forms. The second one is courage. And Andrew, there's an intersection there with, you call it fortitude. And I think there is a challenge in this country around that fortitude and that courage. And in the business world, what I see is you need to be in a position where you are not getting, for lack of a better word to describe it, pushed around by the media, pushed around by your clients. Maybe you're going too far left. There's that temptation. We've seen where that comes. And also, I think often there's a lack of courage in making those hard decisions that need to be made. Someone once told me very early on in my career, those who make decisions suffer alone, and those who fail to make decisions make us all suffer. And I think about that because, again, when you're looking at your teams and you've got your teams and you want those appropriate virtues, if that doesn't fit, you have to make that decision. The third thing is absolutely humility, and I had our clients point that out to us. I'm in a business on Wall Street for 35 plus years, which is not necessarily known for its humility. I think one of the reasons we've been successful and I've been successful is having that. And then lastly, it's consistency. I think too often companies make very impulsive decisions around businesses and around leadership. I think if you have your core virtues/values and you're consistent with them, that leads to ultimate success.
Thank you. Thank you. Lynette?
I can't even turn on the microphone. I've gone from the corporate side of things, working for big film corporations, to basically working for myself, representing small directors and small producers. So, I think that perseverance is a key aspect in having virtue, because the entertainment industry, from a Catholic, is very difficult. You're dealing with studios who have agendas, distributors who have agendas that directly go against Catholic teaching and against your Catholic faith. So how do you remain creative in a space that really just goes against the grain of everything you believe? So what I did is I started working with independent directors and producers, trying to help them bring their craft to the table. And it's an uphill battle. We are not going to be able to take on Netflix. And I had this conversation last night. You spend 40 minutes clicking through Netflix trying to find something to watch. I'm like, oh, okay, this looks okay. And then 15 minutes in, you're like, I can't watch this. And so we're really trying to encourage, especially this younger group of filmmakers, on how to have virtues and how to keep your moral compass in this big sea of people who are going to tell you no. Oh, we liked your film, but it's a little too religious. Oh, we like this character, but if you made him gay, we really could get behind this. And it's difficult. And I think another thing is gratitude. I try to live in gratitude. Be grateful for the big wins and be grateful for the little ones. And I think with my own children, everybody thinks that there's this fear of perfectionism, that you have to be perfect. And I'm like, I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I'm expecting you to be the best person you can be today. You know, we're all going to age, we're all going to grow, we're all going to get wisdom. But perfection is just not something that we can continually have as the top goal, because we all fail. You know, I think this whole younger generation has this fear of failing. And the first thing I say to my attorney is, I don't know what I don't know, so help me. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Rich?
Thank you, Andrew. I was at our table last night with 4 priests, and one of the priests, Father Chris, told me that the best way to create virtue is through suffering. And the best way to create suffering is to be a Mets fan. So I come at this from more of an entrepreneur's point of view. I was with a Wall Street firm, and I managed a department, and through mergers, which happens a lot on Wall Street, I was told that I needed to go back into production. And so I went to, at the time, a senior analyst, Wendy Dominguez, and I said, Wendy, if we're going to go back into production, let's start a firm. So we dropped our securities licenses and became a fee-only firm. And back then it was really unusual. So we started from scratch, and the virtues of fortitude and perseverance were really crucial for us. But we grew quickly. After about 5 years, we'd grown a lot, and I took all the credit for it. And I had a big ego, and through consultants, we believe in using consultants. He told us that we needed to create a little humility for Rich Todd, and we needed to learn to empower others, that it wasn't all about him, about me. I was chief executive officer, chief investment officer, chief cook and bottle washer, and I needed to give others responsibility. If we were going to grow, we were kind of stalled out. I needed to empower others. So it really was a sense of humility that created that atmosphere where we could make new partners, and we could let others take on responsibility. And we grew again. We grew very quickly again. And then we went from 2 or 3 partners to today we have over 20. But at about 10 partners, we were used to running everything past our partners, and believe it or not, with a firm back then of probably 35 people, we kind of created some bureaucracy. And we, in working with Table Group, Pat Liccione, through, I think, the virtue of wisdom, we scaled back and created a leadership team of just 3 people. So we went from having our partners make decisions about everything, or at least running everything up their flagpole, to forming a small leadership team, and we consequently have grown steadily and quickly again.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I'd like to go in sort of the opposite direction. Lynette, maybe I could start with you, which is when you look at newer employees, particularly younger employees, what habits of success, habits of excellence, virtues might they be missing, or might they kind of be a sort of a priority in your mind for them to develop?
I think perseverance. I think for some reason this next generation of young adults is missing grit. I think, speaking as a parent, sometimes we make things too easy for our kids. They don't really know how to struggle gracefully. And if they hit a roadblock, they tend to stop instead of figuring out how to go over it, under it, or through it. I'm not really sure what happened, but I noticed that's a pattern that happens. Maybe because things are too accessible. You know, when I was growing up, there wasn't a cell phone in your hand that was a computer. You had to go find an encyclopedia and look it up. You know, I think also for all the young adults here today, get a mentor. One of the best things that ever happened to me was having mentors. Even when I was working at DreamWorks, it was a great company in the sense that there were no rules. It was a startup company of 3 friends who decided to start a film company. But you could see how you could get lost in all of the glamour of that company without having someone to really run your ideas past. So I went to the head of pay television, Hal Richardson. I'm like, look, I need a mentor. I went to Michael Montgomery, who ran GameWorks, and asked them to be mentors. And when I was stuck, I would go to them and I'd say, listen, this is what I really want to do, but I'm not getting any support. And they would lay it out very honestly of everything I was going to get called out for, what I had to be responsible for, and that for me to own my decisions. Whether you're going to succeed or fail, just own your decision. And I think today, young people are just afraid to make any decision. You know, they put too much thought into it, actually. You know, you shouldn't do things spontaneously or because a feeling, but make a decision.
Thank you. Peter?
It's both a blessing and a curse in that my company is in a position where we're seeing resumes coming from all of the, what you would call, greatest schools around the world, you know, the Ivy Leagues and the MITs of the world. And over the last decade in meeting many of these young interns and students, I'm seeing something here. On the very positive side, I am encouraged about the following. Firstly, and I agree with everything you said, by the way, and I'm going to get to that in a second, there is a great foundation that remains in this country. There are a lot of kids here who still do not have what I would call a sense of entitlement, and they really want it. They want to work hard. They care. They have the skills. And they're also looking for formation, and I'll get to that. So I have a great hope for that. And by the way, as you can imagine, it's not the kids that are most successful are not necessarily the ones that are coming from what you would call the leaders' academic schools and with the best grades, but they have this kind of foundation, many of the virtues you're speaking to, Andrew. By the same token, I'll agree with what Lynette said. There is a challenge around the struggle with adversity that you talked about. But they do want that kind of learning, if you will, on how to get through it. And I couldn't agree any more with the concept of mentors and even informal mentoring. I tell our interns there's really 2 things they need to walk in with. One, humility. And again, I can tell within about 4 minutes if one of our young employees has that kind of sense of entitlement. So have kind of a confident humility, and then go find the right mentor. And it's those folks, and it's that connection. So you have the young student who has this basics, who has that grounding, that wants the formation, that if you give back to, you can see some real results. So I would say that, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you. Rich?
Yes, I would agree with both of you. I think especially with young people, they do have a sense of lack of perseverance and fortitude and grit. I think some of that comes from just they've lived through this blue ribbon culture where everybody's rewarded regardless of how well they do. Also, I think in college, many of you have probably read about being oppressed versus the oppressor, and I think they come into business thinking that in some cases they're being oppressed, and I think in some cases their teachers and professors have told them that. So we are very careful about hiring. So we have 60 employees. We retain 90% of our people, but that means that we hire 6 to replace those every year, and typically we hire another 5 or 6 for growth. And we like to bring our people through the firm, so we hire, 5 to 10 young people. Being a small firm, we do not cast a broad net. We hire for character first, and the best way to judge someone's character is to know their parents. And we hire the children of people that we know. We have a lot of children of Legatus members, for instance. We hire a lot of athletes. They've persevered their whole life. So, and mentorship is really crucial. Like you've both said, we have a formal mentorship program. But I think the best way to overcome this is we surround these young people with just great human beings at our firm that help them become more virtuous and stronger and more gritty.
Thank you, Rich. Let's stay with you. I want to kind of dig now into some specific virtues. We've been kind of naming a bunch of them, but tell us about the role of justice, the virtue of justice in your firm.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. That's a tough one. We have, out of our 60 employees, 40 are Catholic. So we tend to we don't ask a child if they're or a potential hire if they're Catholic, but they're drawn to our culture and drawn to our firm. So I think our firm has a sense of justice. We stress pulling our people up, and the best way to get promoted at Innovest is you have pulled somebody up underneath you, so that when there's an opportunity for promotion, there's somebody there that can take your spot. We give responsibility, and we reward people. I mean, ultimately, they're rewarded in many different ways, but through a great place to work. We've won in the investment industry, I think, 9 out of the last 10 years as a best place to work. That's a way to reward people. Every month we have a volunteer program where we go out and serve the poor. We paint homes, we build trails, we do that during the workday. That's very rewarding for people. And we hire from within, we promote from within. And we want to be in a position where if somebody leaves, there's somebody right behind them that can replace them. And we believe that all that is within the virtue of justice.
Thank you. Thank you. Lynette, can I ask you about the virtue of prudence or practical wisdom, so the habit of making wise decisions? You talked before about young people struggle to actually make decisions. What advice do you give them in terms of helping them grow in a habit of making decisions?
Well, I myself had to learn to make good decisions. Where I used to, I think, be very cautious about making decisions, then I learned to pray about making decisions. So that would be my advice to them. If you're really struggling with the decision, you can ask your mentors what their opinions are, but ultimately pray about your decision. A priest said to my daughter when she was trying to decide which school to go to, NYU to go to film school or USC Marshall School of Business. And they're 2 drastically different schools. And he said, I want you to pray about it. And the when you think about one school, if it begins to annoy you, that is not the school for you. And her father really wanted her to go to the Marshall School of Business. I really wanted her to go to NYU to film school. And the last day I walked in, I'm like, okay, kid, what is it? She goes, well, I won't be going to USC. I'm like, fantastic. Now go tell your dad. So, decisions are hard. And speaking from the perspective of African American youth, when you do not have access to business people, it's really hard to imagine yourself being in a business setting, working at a company, putting on a suit, going to a job where you collaborate with a team of people. That's just not something that they see. We tend to do what we see. We tend to practice what we know. And so what I love to do is mentor young African American students on, just because that's not your norm doesn't mean it cannot be your reality. I paid my way through UCLA working at investment banks. I literally was the night assistant to some of the most brilliant bankers that are in the market today. And I learned from each of them. They all gave me great advice. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to go into an industry that you know nothing about. If you're curious about it, find someone and ask them a question. I tell my daughters this. When you meet people, just say, what do you do for a living and how did you get into that business? And it's that question of, how did you decide to get into banking? They'll begin to tell you a story that resonates with you. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. How did you get into that industry? So I hope I answered.
Thank you. What I think you're highlighting as well, Lynette, is the virtue of teachability, which is one of the virtues allied to practical wisdom. And it's the habit of making it easy for other people to teach you, right? By going out asking the kinds of questions that you're talking about. Very, very, very powerful. And on the note, on the question of how did you get into the business, let's turn now to Peter. I want you to tell us about your experience at Solomon Brothers. And this time I'm prepared. The first time I heard this story was I was interviewing Peter in front of 300 Bush School students and almost fell off my chair.
Wow, this better be good. So I was speaking to some Bush School students, and they were asking me, Andrew was asking me a bit about this and kind of some foundational virtues and how if I'd ever employed them. And I recounted a story, so we're going to go back 34 years ago. So I was 24 years old, a couple of years out of Catholic University, and I joined Solomon Brothers. And many in the room would actually remember the Solomon Brothers. Now when I speak to interns, they have no idea what I'm talking about. But I joined Solomon Brothers, and back then they were the true masters of the universe. The CEO, John Goodfriend, had just been on Time Magazine as the King of Wall Street. Michael Lewis, his first book, Liar's Poker, was about Solomon Brothers, and it was published the week I started. So the quick story is this. I was running a group that was called New Accounts, and really we sat in between compliance and operations, and our job was, if you were opening an account for the State of Wisconsin Investment Board or the Fidelity Magellan Fund, it was our job to make sure all of the data was correct, that where we were going to send the bonds or the stocks to the correct bank was there, that the addresses were correct. Remember, this is all pre-internet, this is pre-email. So I'm running this group, and I'm 24 years old, again, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, out of Catholic University, and I get a request one day to open an account. Now, you would think, again, the account says Fidelity Magellan or GM Pension Fund. This one, the name of the three accounts were TAN A, TAN B, and TAN C. So it was not a corporation's name or a person's name. It was clearly something that was, a made-up name, if you will. And they asked that the delivery of confirmations of transactions would not go to the client, that would be delivered to me, and I was going to be instructed to bring those confirmations up to the government bond trading desk. And again, this is before email, and confirmations of trades would go over the mail. So at 24 years old, I said, this doesn't seem right. So I called, and this again was the government bond trading desk, the true masters of the universe. And I get the head of the government bond trading desk, who, if he could have strangled me over the phone, he would have. And I'll never forget him saying, this is the largest trade in Wall Street in 10 years. You're going to do this. So I got out of my seat, and the head of compliance was sitting right behind me, and I walked in his office. His name was Chris, and I said, Chris, trading desk wants me to do this. I don't see how this makes sense. He gets the head of the trading desk to come down to, at this point, it's the compliance or operations floor. Probably the first time he had ever been on that floor. He walks in the office and explains what they're trying to do. And this gentleman who I reported to said, go ahead and do it. The next day I come in, and on my chair there is a stack of paper this tall with different bond trades that were done. So I dutifully walked them upstairs to the government bond trading desk, brought them to this gentleman. He said, thank you very much. I'm buying you and your team pizza. I said, great. About a week later, the same request came in, account A, B, C, and D. And I had made a decision when that gentleman told me the first time to go ahead and do this. I said, can I have a memo? And I want to put this in perspective, okay? I was 24 years old. My interests at that time were, where was I going to go to law school? Where was happy hour? And could I possibly convince a young lady in Manhattan to go on a date with me? All right? But I asked the head of government bond trading at Solomon Brothers for a memo. This is pre-emails. I had never asked for something like that previously. I took that memo the first time and the second time, and everybody know those like hole punch things? I got the 3-hole punch. I put it in a black binder. I shoved it in my desk, and I went back to work. About 6 months later, I'm about to go to Seton Hall, I believe, for law school, and I get a phone call to come up to the 40th floor of Solomon Brothers from the head the general counsel of the firm. I actually was probably so young I didn't panic over it, although I should have. I walked upstairs. And again, this is like central casting. So you can imagine I open this conference room on the executive floors, and there's more mahogany you can ever see, and there's this huge table. And in there I see our head counsel, who I knew a little bit, and there's 11 or 12 other people in the room. And it was very clear that not all of them were Solomon Brothers employees. So now I'm starting to get nervous, and they ask, why did you do this? Why would you ever go and open an account under the name Tan? And why would you agree to have confirmations given to you, not to a client? And of course, the gentleman who okayed it standing there, and I said, well, he said I could do it. And so the general counsel looks. They said, wow, but why would you do it? Chris, are you sure you did this? And I'll never forget. I said, well, you know, I have the memos. And the look on 11 or 12 people's faces said, you have memos? I said, yep. And they said, do you still have them? And I said, yes. And they said, where are they? And I said, they're down on my desk. 4 people followed me down to my desk. I dutifully pulled out that black binder, and there were the memos from the head of government bond trading approved by this person from compliance. And I handed it to them. What ended up happening, for those of you who could remember, it ended up really being the beginning of the fall of Solomon Brothers. The CEO had to resign. Warren Buffett ended up taking over the firm. And what he was doing, the government has a regulation that not any one bank or any one client can buy a certain amount of a government bond auction, because you don't want to rig or corner the government bond auction. And what he was doing was putting in fake orders under these fake accounts. That proved that folks at Solomon at a senior level knew what was going on, because I had those memos. So I tell that story. It changed my career and my life. And it was at a young age, something didn't feel right. and I'm not a courageous person. I'm terrified of spiders. I'm not at all right? But I had this formation. I went to Catholic University. I went to a parochial high school. I grew up one of 7 children in a large Catholic family. It didn't seem right, but I knew that I had to ask and I had to push. And again, I'm not courageous, but somehow at that moment, I had the guts to push back. And thank goodness I asked for those memos. And that's the story.
Yeah. Can you imagine 300 business students hearing firsthand this story of that? Of a 24-year-old, that is almost the definition of courage, of doing what you know to be right, even though it was not a comfortable position to be in, right? But actually finish the story. What happened as a result after everything was, yeah?
Oh, well, so I was going to go to law school, and then, because of these memos, it protected some folks. And so they came to me and said, boy, you seem to make good decisions, and that showed some guts. So rather than going to law school, which they would have paid for, and I was going to come back and work in compliance, they said, there's this new trading desk we're building. We're not really sure what it's about, but you seem to be a smart kid. Go figure it out. And that was called program trading. And I started the first desk on Wall Street with Salomon Brothers. And here I am still doing some form of this 34 years later. So that's the end of the story.
It's rare that an act of courage gets paid so quickly, So I just think it's just a fabulous story. So I want to write this up. So yeah, we definitely. Do we have time for questions, or are we going to a break? Good. So questions for our panelists. We need to borrow the mics again. Just one? Okay, yeah, thank you. I think we have a question here. 2, yeah.
Thank you all. Just wanted to kind of ask a question for the Leonine folks in the room who are still kind of building our careers. I was going to ask this question to you, Peter, before you gave that story. Now I definitely want to ask you. We focused a lot of the session on developing virtues underneath our umbrellas, right? As many people in the capacity of CEOs, as heads of household. I wanted to ask any advice that any of you have, Peter in particular, because you've been in such large corporations, about developing virtues upward, right? Pushing back on company cultures which don't necessarily align with the virtues that you either have or are trying to develop.
I think it's around leading by example. And I think you're going to have your own personal virtues, and you're going to surround yourself with people that have and they can be of any faith, but if they share your virtues, again, people want to be led. Surround yourself with those folks and just lead them. It's really, I don't want to oversimplify it. And in the pushing back, again, you don't have to push back. What I have found is rational people usually make rational decisions, and over time, things swing back to the right way. That's my view.
I think use kindness. Kindness really goes a far way with people. And I'd also say don't be afraid to live your faith at work. I once had to take a group of executives from UPS to lunch to try to convince them to mail a copy of Steven Spielberg's film Amistad to every high school in America. He wanted to gift this film, but he didn't want to pay for the shipping. So I went out to lunch with these executives from UPS, and I sat down, and I was a new convert to Catholicism, and lunch came, and I blessed myself. And I look up, and everyone's just staring at me with their mouths open, and I'm like, is there a problem? And this girl said, no, I'm Catholic, I don't do that. Turns out everybody at the table was Catholic. So I got my free shipping. Lunch was great.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it is important to let them know that you're Catholic, and I think being selfless is the best way to do it. Being kind, but let them know, and blessing yourself is a great way to do it. But you know, when they're gonna recognize that you're different, and they're gonna say, yeah, that's the Catholic guy. He's great. He'll do anything for us. He works really hard. He's a great example.
Thank you.
Thank you to our panelists for sharing their practical wisdom with us, and to you, Dr. Arbella, as well. One of the Superhabits' great practical enemies is over-proceduralization, right? It's an attempt to remove human judgment and human decision-making from processes. It's certainly one of the reasons why government is so ineffective in how it operates. But there is a role for procedures to minimize risks associated with compliance, for example, or for quality control. So how do you balance getting procedures sort of in your operations while also giving your employees the authority to do their jobs and to bring their virtues to the fore in the most impactful way? Thank you.
I think that's a great risk that we have in corporate America today, and I've worked at a number of different large banks of different sizes. There's a difference between best practices and procedures, and I think when you live in a world of best practices, that's much better than procedures, and I think that what you can see throughout the developing world is the increase in regulation and, quote, procedures is stunting growth and creativity. And I'm sure as an entrepreneur, you would agree, both of you are more entrepreneurial than me, would agree with that, would see that.
Yeah, we're a very process-oriented firm, and we demand virtuous behavior in running the different processes that we have. And I don't think that virtue and process are two sides of a coin. I think virtue is more behavioral.
I think sometimes people use procedure not to make change, and I'll give you a perfect example. I'm now in charge of my father's healthcare. He's 82 years old. He's a military, former Air Force personnel, and we have to deal with the VA. And the VA is all about procedures. They're not really, and they're there to make vets' lives better, but no, they're not, because there's so many procedures that nothing is better. So I think you have to kind of find a balance of procedure for accountability, but not procedure to not do what you're supposed to be doing, if that makes sense.
If I could add my 2 cents, it might be helpful to think of procedures and processes as the organizational equivalent of habits. And like habits, they can be good and they can be bad. They're sort of the neural pathways of the organization. And so it's good to proceduralize routine things that you want to be sure are done exactly the same, particularly with related to compliance, but it's worth scrutinizing those procedures on a regular basis to make sure they're not holding back innovation and people's growth and et cetera. So, you have a question at the back? Yep.
Right here, yeah. Thank you all. Each of you, on some level, mentioned the value of mentorship. I've certainly been blessed with many amazing mentors in my life. I have to admit, though, I think I've forgotten to pass that on to people that I lead. And so I'm curious, with our teams, how do we maybe set up a formal mentorship program? What are some of the best practices, the first steps, the things to avoid?
I don't know about setting up like a formal mentorship program. Start it informal if you've never done one, where you just ask people in your group, are you willing to mentor somebody? And right now I'm finalizing a production called In the Paint, and it's about an inner city basketball team from Syracuse, New York. And it's about one guy who decided to stand up and mentor other people's children. These are young boys who have no fathers, some of them don't have mothers. and he takes time away from his own children to mentor these children, and the effect is incredible. We could change the world if we would just mentor other people's children. So if you don't have a formal organization, and I think there's one called mentor.org that was started by a Catholic gentleman, start informally. For everybody sitting in this room, if you have 30 minutes a week, we could change the world by mentoring other people.
I personally, my personal experience, that formal, organized mentorship programs only work to a certain point. It's the informal mentorship and programs like this, because you have to have people that want to do it. And if you've got 100 employees and you have 30 that want to do it, that's great. Promote them, encourage them. That's my view.
I agree with both of you. We do have a formal mentorship program. We've identified those that we believe are the best mentors, and they have 3 or 4 people that they're mentoring. And we've outlined what that means. It's worked well. Mentoring works great at schools. We have a Cristo Rey partnership where we have children in from a Cristo Rey school. We pay their tuition to go to a Jesuit school. And I could tell you our mentorship with these kids has not only meant a lot to them, but it has meant a ton to our firm and our culture. And I think we found that what's been surprising is how much our mentors grow in being a mentor.
Do we have one more question? I think everybody's aching for a break. Is that? Another big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much.